today we're talking about walking the Camino de Santiago. So the Camino de Santiago, for those of you that don't know, is one of the largest walks, the most popular walks in all of the world, and thousands of people walk it every year. And I believe people have been walking it during the pandemic too. So we're going to find out from a couple of experts what exactly it's all about, where it goes, how long it is, all that kind of good stuff in case you're interested in doing it yourself.
Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries in all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure.
So we have with us Tom and Katie from their blogs, Travel Past 50. And Katie, your blog is?
A Rambling Unicorn.
A Rambling Unicorn, which is all basically about hiking, whereas Tom's is much more world travel. Tom, where did you go on the Camino? And give us a little introduction.
We did the so-called French route, the Camino Frances, and we started in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in France. First day, you walk over the Charlemagne route over the Pyrenees to Roncesvalles, or in French, Roncesvalles, and then you're in Spain. And from there, it's about 800 kilometers, 500 miles to Santiago. And you just keep walking.
And so how long did this take you?
Well, we did it in the year that I turned 60. So we weren't not quite as fast as a lot of people do it. I think we took 40 days, including 3 rest days. So we were actually walking for 37 days. I think that's maybe a couple of days longer than typical. I think most people do it in 33 to 35 days. But we were not out to break any records. We just, well, at that, we averaged walking 22 kilometers a day. So
wow.
that's enough.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. How about you, Katie? What have you done?
Well, I walked the Camino Portugues. So most people walk the French route, or that's the route that most people have heard of. But there's many Camino routes across Europe that all end in Santiago de Compostela. The second most well-known one is the Portuguese Way, and you can either start in Lisbon or you can start in Porto, and then you walk north to Santiago de Compostela. And I started in Porto, and I did it just a couple of months ago, so I did do it during the pandemic. And it's about 240 kilometers, which is about 150 miles. And I was not in a hurry. So I went slower than Tom. I was going maybe 18 to 20 kilometers a day. And I took 2.5 weeks. And I took a couple rest days, and I was just taking my sweet time and really enjoying it.
Yeah, I should mention, I've also done parts of the northern route, the Camino del Norte, that starts in Irún in the Basque country and kind of hugs the coast, the north coast, the Atlantic coast of Spain. And it's probably about the same length, but it's much more difficult than the Frances because it's mountainous all the way, pretty much. So you're going up and down a lot, especially up.
Especially up. It always seems to me when you're hiking that, when it's a hilly thing, that you always do more up than down. I don't really understand how that works.
Well, you learn, I think, real quick, if you do any mountain hiking, and we have done a fair amount, that going down is maybe more difficult than going up. It's a lot harder on your knees and legs and ankles and things. And that's when you're really glad that you have hiking poles, if you have them. so you
For
can
sure.
brace yourself on the way down.
Something to catch your fall a little bit.
Yeah.
With my luck, they just go over the side or something, as just like when I'm skiing. Same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so from your experiences, about how much does it cost to hike the Camino? I know that there are services out there that will arrange everything for you, but I also know that you could do it independently. I'm assuming both of you did it independently.
Well, we did. I'll answer that first. I mean, my dad is a little old right now, but we were, and this was pre-pandemic too. So what I've heard is that a lot of the albergues, in other words, the sort of dormitory type inns that you stay in, are closed or are open on a much more limited basis. So now I think it's more difficult to do it, and you might be better off reserving in advance, which is a bit of a problem because when we started out every day, we didn't really know where we were going to stop. We would go as far as we felt comfortable going. And you could always just walk into an albergue and get a bed. And I think it happened only maybe 2 or 3 times that the first place we stopped didn't have a bed for us. Now, getting back to how much it cost, I mean, it was anywhere from 5 to 15 euros when we did it. I think it's probably a little bit more than that now, but it's not.
For the bed itself.
Yeah, per person. And for that, you got a cot or a bed in a shared room. You had shared bathrooms, shared shower, probably had a laundry sink where you could wash your clothes and a line where you could hang them up. And we did it in September, so it was still plenty hot on the Camino Frances, so your clothes dried quickly in the sun. So in other words, I mean, I think if you budgeted 30 to 40 euros a day, including food, that would be enough. Is that what you found?
Is that 30 or 40 euros a day each person?
Well, the lodging, let's just say the lodging is going to be 15 each. And then, whatever you spend on food. Most villages that you stop in had little, family-owned restaurants that had Camino meals, they would call them. And they were, a regular sort of Spanish 3-course meal. It would be salad, potatoes, and fish, or salad, potatoes, and meat. And a glass of wine would be 10 to 15 euros.
That's where they were making their money.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Katie?
What did you find, Katie?
Yeah. So I did hike during the pandemic, and the albergs, some of them were open and some of them were closed. The public ones, some of them were open and some weren't. Many of the private ones were open. I brought a little sleeping bag with me because I thought I would be sleeping in them. And then that's the great thing about this kind of walk. You can walk as many miles as you want to walk in a day, or as little miles. Like the first day I was on the Camino, my husband was staying in Porto in an Airbnb, because we're traveling around long term right now. And like 3 miles in, I kind of re-injured an old injury in my foot. And I said, this is it for today. I called an Uber and went back to the hotel, spent a couple of days recovering. And then 2 days later, I called an Uber to take me right back where I started. And I just kept going.
Yeah.
And then my first night on trail, I did go to an albergue and I stayed there. And I met a couple of nice ladies in my room, and it was really nice. And then afterwards I was like, I thought I was going to want to like meet people on the trail and make lots of friends, which I have done on other long distance trails. But I just realized what I really needed was alone time. I needed like kind of time with my thoughts and kind of just think about things and some spiritual moments. So what I did is every morning or so, I would kind of think about how many kilometers or miles I might want to go that day. And then I would open up like booking.com or some other app like that and just book myself a private room in a guest house or Airbnb. And I was it was awesome. I had like my own little bathroom every night, and most times it worked out pretty great. So It really depended. I was spending generally about 30 to 40 euros a day on like a private, low budget room. I did splurge a couple nights and got a nicer room or a place where I couldn't find, sometimes there's not as many options. And then I did stay in a couple albergs too. So, but I spent, and then it's possible to do it that way. And if you do, you don't have to bring a sleeping bag, which makes your overall pack weight lighter. So I was probably spending more like maybe 50 euros a day, the luxury version of the Camino.
Actually, I'm glad to hear that. I think that when, our listeners are going to be from both persuasions, more the budget friendly and more the luxury friendly. So I think that's great. That just happened to be serendipitous. I love it.
And that's been kind of the way that we've been doing a lot of our road trips pre-pandemic is you get up in the morning, you decide for a road trip, you decide where you're going and book something before you leave. Mm-hmm. So that's good to know that even during the pandemic on the Camino, you were able to do that.
Yeah, I think definitely I'd recommend there's a Camino Facebook group on Facebook, obviously. And it is got a lot of current advice that and I think probably the trend is definitely toward booking in advance these days for a couple of reasons. One is there are a lot more people on the Camino than there used to be. Mm-hmm. Two, a lot of the albergues are closed because of COVID. And three, you might, because of COVID, not want to be sleeping in the same room as 20 other people you don't know.
That's a very good point.
That was exactly one of the reasons why I chose not to stay in dormitories. Yeah. I didn't feel comfortable with it. So
on the good side is Spain is a lot more COVID aware than the United States is, for example. We were just in Spain and everybody's wearing masks. Everybody's vaccinated. They take it seriously. You have to be vaccinated to get into Spain in the first place if you're not Spanish.
Yep.
And the Spanish vaccination rate is above 90%, I believe. So
wow, that's great.
Way safer than the United States.
Well, I can attest to that. As like we said, we just got over Omicron. Katie, did you wear the mask on? I mean, you're outside and you're not necessarily with people. So how much did you wear the mask while you were doing this whole thing? Just in towns? Like, give me an idea.
Yeah, I definitely wore a mask when I was around other people, like in close quarters outside. Like if I was, in a building or in a restaurant or anything like that, when we weren't eating or drinking, we would wear a mask. But, I sort of avoided the albergs. When I did go to albergs, like, you're not going to wear a mask when you're sleeping. I mean, maybe you're supposed to, but no one I saw did. And that's, after I spent one night in there might be some albergs where people do, but I only went to a couple and the ones I went to, they weren't. So, but I did wear a mask when I was in other kinds of social situations, like in grocery stores or kind of in close quarters with people. But when you're outside and you're able to have a social distance and you have the air around you, even if you're supposed to wear a mask, I don't think it doesn't really make sense. And so you're a big working out, and if you're hiking and walking, and it's kind of hard to wear a mask. So I always had it like hanging from my ears or something like that. So if I needed to pull it out of my pocket or whatever, if some other people came by that were, especially if they weren't pilgrims, I would definitely put it on. So
one thing, the Vax cards, were people checking Vax cards at restaurants or anything like that? Not in
Spain.
They weren't.
They do in France, but like I said, as a foreigner, you can't even get into Spain if you're not vaccinated. So it's, we had a QR code on our phones that I think we had to show exactly once the time we were in Spain. Yeah, we had to show it at immigration to get into the country, but after that, never had to show it.
The rules keep changing in Europe, and it changes from country to country, and it changes constantly. I was in Portugal a few months, like last summer, right when some rules were changing, and then they started enforcing showing your vaccine card all the time. And I'd had to do that. And then we left for a few months and came back to Porto to start the Camino. And they weren't, they had, gosh, I traveled a lot. I can't exactly remember, but I don't think I really had to show the vaccine card on the Camino much.
So, okay. So first of all, I'd love to hear why you guys both chose to go on the Camino. And then the way I'm envisioning this, since I've never done this myself, I have known lots of people who have done it, including some friends who just retired from the same job I was doing. A whole group of ladies went and did, I think they did the minimum 100 kilometers to get the certificate. But they did it. Hey, you know, I wouldn't have ever expected any of those women in that group to have done something like that. So it's amazing to me.
Everybody does their own Camino, they say. So
that's right. And
whatever you do is fine with me.
Fantastic. So A, why did you pick it to do? And B, how does it go? You walk all day and then you eat and sleep and walk and then eat and sleep. And then what do you do once you get there? Like, what's the hoorah at the end?
You want me to? I'll go first.
Sure.
To answer your question, I mean, when we were walking across, the French route in September, it was still pretty hot in Spain. I mean, during the day, especially crossing the Meseta, the central mesa that's part of Spain, it was 42, 44 degrees Celsius. So it was very hot. So what we actually did, the daily routine, is we would get up at 5:30 or 6 and put on our headlamps and go and walk for a couple of hours before it got light, maybe. And because it was so much cooler, and we tried to be done walking by about 1 p.m. because it was just too hot to walk in the middle of the afternoon. And if you've walked across the Meseta too, and you know something of the history of Spain, you know that they cut down every tree in that part of Spain to build the Spanish Armada. So there's no shade either.
Oh, wow.
And so it's after, when we would get to the albergue at 1 o'clock or thereabouts, we would check in, dump our stuff, probably, take a shower, wash our clothes, hang it up. And then we would go out and have, the midday meal in Spain, which, at 2 o'clock is fine. And that's the big meal also. And then, we would lay around the albergue or sit in a cafe and drink way too much Spanish brandy and wine and what have you, and read a book and then, have a little evening meal. Usually by that time too, the pilgrims are straggling and you've probably met a few people on the way, and you might have a drink with them and then go to bed early and, rinse and repeat.
Okay. Katie?
Well, to answer, you asked a couple questions. So one of your questions about why doing it. And I've done some other long distance trails. The longest trail that I've done is the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a really long trail in the United States that involves backpacking. And then I heard, so I did that in 2017. And then I had some friends who walked the Camino. I actually have known about it for over 10 years, and I've been sort of thinking about it. So, and I've been wanting to hike the Camino Portuguese for a while. It's just been kind of calling to me. I just like this, this kind of spiritual aspect of it, even though I'm not particularly religious. But I like the idea of walking through the countryside, and you don't have to bring all your food with you, and you get to drink wine. And I love going on solo adventures. So, I was going to hike it in March 2020, and I was in Europe at the time and had to leave because of the pandemic, and I had to reschedule that adventure. So when the opportunity came again, I walked it in late September, most of October of this last year. So it wasn't as hot as it was in Spain when you hiked it, Tom. And so I was a bit worried that I was going to get rained on, and I just lucked out. The one day it rained, I took a day off because I was feeling a little under the weather that day. So I didn't even get rained on once, even though it was in October, and it was just this gorgeous weather. And I was going pretty slow. There was another woman that I met the first night at the Alberg, and we weren't hiking together. That being said, we ran into each other almost every day. So we were not hiking together, but kind of almost like leapfrogging, and we would share rooms sometimes. And we ended up at the same hotels most nights, but not every night. It was really nice to have that friendship if you wanted it. But then if you just wanted to be by yourself, that's okay too. So oftentimes we would have a pretty leisurely morning and maybe not start walking until 9. It was pretty normal for me. Most pilgrims were going a little faster and they would start earlier, but I would often start around 9. And then I actually had to hike, like when I crossed, so half of the Camino Portugues, when you walk from Porto to Santiago, is half of it's in Portugal, and then you cross the border and then you're in Spain. Right at Valencia, you cross the border, you go over a bridge, and then you're in Spain, and then you go to Tui, where the Tui Cathedral is, and it's pretty fun. And then you're in a new time zone, and then it's darker in the morning because you're in a new time zone, and that takes a little getting used to. So then I would walk for a few hours, and then I would have maybe a snack if there was a place to have a snack. And then I would have like a nice relaxing lunch, and then walk in the afternoon, usually arrive around 4, 5 p.m. and hand wash my clothes in the sink and set it up to dry someplace and have dinner and a glass of wine with whoever was around, the other pilgrims, and go to bed around, I don't know, 10 and rinse and repeat. So,
yeah.
So how about the end? What happens when you're all done with the Camino? There's got to be a party.
Yeah.
I'll just go. Okay, so
yeah.
it was this pretty emotional moment when the cathedral, like you first see the cathedral from when you're hiking the Portuguese one. I first saw it when I was about 4 or 5 kilometers away, where I kind of walked up and over a vista, and you could see the city in the distance. And if you look really close, you could just see the cathedral, and you're like, oh my gosh, there it is. Like, it was really this sort of emotional feeling to reach it. My husband, who had been in Porto the whole time, took the train up and met me. So he was waiting in the square, and I walked into the square, and there's like thousands of people, and it's there's this big empty, a big plaza square right in front of the cathedral in Santiago. And then when you enter it, there's just hundreds and thousands of pilgrims who are all just arriving, and they're from all the different paths all over Europe. They're all arriving and converging, and they're all like on the ground and hugging each other and kissing each other and like posing for photos. And it's this really kind of like emotionally charged atmosphere where everyone's there's all this kind of high emotions. So I found my husband, and it was really nice to be reunited with him after 2.5 weeks. And I didn't end up going to an albergue or hanging out with other pilgrims. I just hung out with my husband, and that was really nice. I did meet up with a couple friends for some wine later, and then I had a little close encounter with bed bugs the previous night.
Oh, no.
So I was pretty sure I spotted them in my linens at this place that I stayed, which shall remain nameless. So I was pretty paranoid about that. So I honestly spent a lot of my last day like researching what to do about bed bugs. And then we were really lucky because the place that we were renting, it was an Airbnb apartment, had a dryer, and I just put everything in there on hot heat, zapped it all. And then the next day I went to the pilgrim office, and then you can get your certificate. So that was really exciting and emotional to get my certificate, and they write your name in Latin and calligraphy. And I'd heard horror stories that you have to wait for hours and hours. And I waited they implemented a new procedure because of COVID where you go and you take a number, and then you're kind of supposed to wait elsewhere until your number is about to be called. And then you go in and give you your certificate. So, yeah.
Wasn't too bad.
Wasn't too bad. The one thing I didn't do, I did go inside the cathedral and take a look. But for various reasons, mostly because I was a little stressed out about the bed bug situation, I was spending a lot of my time on that. I didn't get a chance to go to Pilgrim's Mass. And so this year is a holy year, and so is next year. And so what that means is anyone doing the Camino in these years, a holy year is when, I can't remember which day it is, falls on a Sunday, like the St. James feast day falls on a Sunday. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, a few things happen. If you're Catholic, you can get more sins forgiven, I think. I don't really know how it works.
You get a plenary indulgence.
Yes.
A what?
That's what it is.
You get a plenary indulgence, which means if you complete the Camino, you make a good confession, you step outside into the plaza and get run over by a bus and die, you go straight to heaven.
Regardless.
So,
yeah.
That's a plenary indulgence.
Okay.
And then the other thing that happens in the Holy Year is there's a little door in the back of the cathedral that's usually closed, and that's where the actual relics of St. James are, supposedly. And in the Holy Year, you get to go look at them. Mm-hmm. And so we got to see them. And then if you go to the special Pilgrim's Mass, the big special thing about the Camino de Santiago is they have the Voto Fumero, which is this giant, enormous ball of incense a censer that hangs from the ceiling, and it takes all these guys to pull on these ropes, and it swings around during Pilgrim's Mass. Historically, it was to kill all the insects and the bad smells from the smelly pilgrims or something. But if you get a chance to see it, it's supposed to be a really big deal. And they always do it during Pilgrim's Mass if it's a holy year, and they don't always do it in other years. So long story short, I didn't get a chance to go to Pilgrim's Mass. I didn't see the Voto Fumero, and I'm a little bummed about that. But
so going back.
Well,
maybe, it's addictive. Tom, you were talking about Camino del Norte, and that's the one I got my eye on if I go on another one, which I probably will.
Yeah. Well, we're considering doing the Camino del Norte and then maybe cutting off, I think in Oviedo, you can walk south and the Camino Primitivo, which is even harder than the Norte. And fewer places to stay. You have to, it's more mountainous, and you have to be willing to walk more distance each day. But the Bota Fumero, which Katie just mentioned, I've seen it twice. It's a pretty amazing thing, and they do it, I think, on Sundays always, and sometimes during the Pilgrim's Masses, which they do every day, but they do them at different times. And so they may only do it once a day. But it's this censer, which is about as tall as a person. And they literally shovel incense into it and light it.
This thing gets swinging on these big ropes, and it goes like the entire length of the nave of or the transept. I mean, I think they get it going all different ways, and it takes like 6 guys to pull on these ropes and get it swinging in just the right way. And I'm amazed that they don't hit people on the head and kill them with it. But it's really, and it fills the entire enormous cathedral with the smoke of the incense. So it's really fun to see.
But, okay, so explain what a Pilgrim's Mass is. Is it just really a mass that anybody could go to, but the pilgrims are going because they're finished? I mean, why do they call it the Pilgrim's Mass?
Because they do it every day during the Camino. I mean, it's supposedly, you go into the cathedral and you give thanks that you've completed the Camino. And like I said, if you go to confession and pass through the holy door, you get the plenary indulgence, which is the big deal. And
they do a lot of sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tom. No. They do like 5 or to 7, I don't know, they do like 3 to 5 Pilgrim's Masses. I mean, they do quite a few.
Yeah, they do them all the time, all during the day. So
now Jim and I were in Santiago de Compostela November, a couple of years ago. It was rainy and it was cold, and there were a couple pilgrims that were there when we were there, but only a couple. There was not many. And this one guy, in fact, I think I posted a picture of it not too long ago. He's got his rain gear on. I mean, he was the most joyful look on his face. He wasn't really with anybody. He was just so happy to be there. So I can see how, if there were more people, that would just sort of build and build. But I could see that it was, whether it's triumph or I don't know what, but he was really happy. And, but I didn't know, or we didn't see while we were there. And we were there, I mean, around the cathedral in that placa, we were there pretty much, I would say, most of the day because, just looking at all the different things and doing our thing, finding little shops to go to or whatever.
So,
we were just there in this last trip to Spain, and so it was about the same. In fact, I think I looked it up, and we were there on October 5th, which was the day we arrived in Santiago and we did the Camino the first time. So I think there were definitely more people doing the Camino now than there used to be. I think the year we did it, which was 10 years ago, there were, I want to say something like 100,000 people completed the Camino that year. And now I think typically it's 200,000 to 300,000 people do it per year.
That's mind-boggling, really.
And I think a lot more of them are doing what your friends did, Corinne, is doing, starting at Sarria, 100 kilometers away, and doing it there. And I think a lot of Spanish people do it that way, that they start at Sarria because I was told by a Spanish woman that it's something you put on your resume. It's something you put on your CV if you're Spanish, that you've done the Camino. And so to officially say you've done the Camino, you start at Sarria, you run for 4 days, and you're done. And you can put it on your resume.
So you're truly Spanish if you've completed the Camino.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. But I would say that a lot of people think that they should. Katie mentioned about it being spiritual for her too. And you asked earlier about why you do it. And I think there are like 3 groups of people. There are people who are Catholic - Christian who do it for a very religious reason. There are people who do it for a spiritual reason, which doesn't necessarily mean that they're hardcore Christian or anything. And then there are other people who do it because it's a really interesting hike. There's so much to see every day along the Camino. I mean, the Roman history, the Spanish history, the Moorish history, the Gallic history. I mean, it's a fascinating walk, and you're going slow enough that you can stop and see stuff that you would never see on a tour. You can walk into these 1,000-year-old churches that are open and see, as my friend used to call it, stuff. Really marvelous art and things like that. So it's historical, it's cultural, and that's apart from the spirituality of it. Mm-hmm. And another thing I wanted to mention is Katie mentioned earlier, I walked with my wife that whole distance, but we almost never walked together.
Oh, really?
There was always a couple 100 meters between us. And that was sort of by design. I think, you do your Camino by yourself. And the silence and the sound of the crunch of your feet on the gravel or wherever you're walking is part of the experience, I think. There were only a few times where I remember talking while walking. Once you get there and you meet up with people and you have drinks with them and stuff like that, yeah. But actually while you're walking, it's a pretty solitary experience.
It certainly can be. And that's the great thing about the Camino is, whatever you need it to be or want it to be, you can do that. So if you're with a group of people and you feel like you need some time alone, you just draw back, or, you just kind of do your own thing. And if you want to talk to people and someone else wants to talk with you, I definitely had some times where I felt social, and there were other pilgrims along, and I chatted with all kinds of interesting people while I walked. I often like to listen to music or audiobooks or podcasts when I walk. It's something I've always really enjoyed. So I always had some headphones with me. And if I felt like doing that, I did that. So, Tom, one of the things you mentioned earlier about like all the amazing history and the cathedrals, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is the stamps.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. I'm a super goal-oriented person. And the idea, like, if I can get a stamp or a star for doing something, I'm the kind of person that will do it because I think that's awesome. And so with the Camino de Santiago, you get a pilgrim's passport, a little booklet with an accordion booklet that you can open and fold, and it has all these spots for stamps. And you're supposed to get a certain number of stamps per day when you walk. And the stamps come from any accommodations, cathedrals, churches, businesses, various places along the way. Tourism information boards will stamp your passport. And then you're supposed to show that at the end to get your certificate. So for me, half the fun was collecting the stamps. And so it would be a fun excuse where I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to go to this restaurant and ask them for a stamp. But because I'm motivated by the stamps, I will go inside, or I will go inside like a cute little wayside cathedral that looks really old. And you poke your head inside, and there's a little like self-stamping station with a little pad and a stamp. You're like, oh, that's a cool one. Like they design all their own little stamps. So I quite enjoyed that aspect of it.
If you like that, you need to climb Mount Fuji one time, because the whole idea of Mount Fuji is you have a walking stick, and then the stamps are actually wood burned into your hiking stick as you go up the mountain. Wow. It's very cool, and it only takes a day. Both of you could do it, no problem.
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I could go there right now.
But I just admired it from a distance, didn't climb it.
It's rough. I mean, it's gravel where you sink into the gravel a little bit. So it can be really rough. Plus, traditionally you do it overnight. So even though it's only a day amount of hike, you usually start around 8 in the evening, go up all night long. So that the idea is that you get to the summit around 4:00 in the morning when the sun starts to rise, and you're there for the sunrise with the monks chanting. And I mean, it's of course, and plus you've just had the wood burning stamps all the way up. People are sucking on their oxygen. Put it on your bucket list. That's all I'm saying.
Yep.
A good hike.
Sounds amazing.
It's all uphill, of course.
And that's definitely all uphill.
Until you have to come down. Yeah. And then you just kind of slide down through all the scree. And that was a good hike. That was a lot of fun. So you've got this passport. I'm assuming that you turn that in to prove that you've walked that you've done the Camino, and that's what they base the certificate on.
Yeah. I mean, technically, so to be eligible for the Camino, if you're walking, it's basically the last 100 kilometers is what's required for you to be eligible for the Camino. So that's why, you were talking about people who just do the last 100 kilometers. So you can do more than 100 kilometers, and most people do, but you only are required to do 100 if you go on foot. You can also go on bike.
You have to do 200.
Mm-hmm. If you do by bike, or I think on horseback, which theoretically you can do, you have to do 200. But you just show them the passport at the end, but you get to keep it because it's an awesome souvenir. Right. So. Yeah.
Sure. So are you paying for the privilege of going on the Camino to begin with, like a registration fee or something?
I think you make a small donation at Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port because they have a pilgrim center there, because it's kind of the number one starting place. Most people who do the Camino Frances, the French route, and most of them start in Saint-Jean. But you make a little donation, and I think I paid €2 or something like that to get your passport. I mean, it's just an accordion folded piece
Cardboard,
of heavy
yeah.
paper with a nice logo on the front and the year that you've started. So, I mean, it's not a big deal at all.
Yeah, I paid €2 or €3 for mine. And then I knew that I was going to get more stamps than there were room for. So I picked up a separate one when I got to TUI. And so I have 2. And then if you do the Portuguese Camino, TUI, which is the first town once you cross the border into Spain, is the traditional starting point if you want to just do like a shorter one, because that's just over 100 kilometers. And that's a pretty nice walk. And then you're walking the whole time in Spain.
It's a two-sided deal, too. So if I ever get around to framing mine, I'm going to frame it between 2 pieces of glass so I can look at both sides of it. But to tell you the honest truth, I don't even know where mine is right now. I'm sure my wife does, but I don't. In fact, I think we just moved last year, so I think I saw it then, and I also saw my Compostela, my certificate. So.
Cool.
Which is in Latin, which is kind of fun. So,
Which you love, right? I saw that you did your Latin Wordle.
Yeah, I do. I'm fairly fluent in Latin.
Wow.
And Spanish. So the Jesuit education.
Yeah, I'm from the Northeast, and they were still teaching Latin in high school when I was in high school as well. But I don't think that lasted much after the early 80s at the latest, I think. I don't know.
Well, I'm a good person to travel with, especially in Europe, because I can read all the inscriptions in the churches.
That's pretty cool. That is really cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
So back to a little bit about the logistics of it. You're carrying packs, you're wearing packs. About how much are you carrying? Water, food along the way? It doesn't sound like you really need it. You want to stop at little cafes or whatever.
But you need water, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, the nice, it's kind of funny to read on that Facebook group I was talking about. So many people are worried about water. Well, Spain is not a third world country. The water is perfectly drinkable wherever you go. And every village not every, but almost every village has got a public fountain where you can stop and fill your water bladder or your water bottle. And so you don't have to haul that much water because you can refill it all the time. And water's heavy.
Sure.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
To answer your question about pack, I think there's a lot of discussion about that. But if you're carrying a 35-liter pack, that's probably enough. I carried a bigger one, and I started out with a bunch of stuff I didn't need. And in Pamplona, on the 3rd day, Chris and I both offloaded a whole bunch of crap and mailed it to ourselves in Santiago and picked it up when we got there, which you can do. Pretty nice service that they do for pilgrims.
Because they know you will go down.
Yeah.
So it's a good hint. Really, what do you need then? I mean, 2 sets of clothes, 3 sets of clothes?
You don't need a lot. I mean, I have some experience doing long distance backpacking. And so for me, I didn't have to bring a tent and all cooking gear and stuff. So it was kind of nice. I had to backpack with me because I was already backpacking around Europe. So I just used the same backpack and took some stuff out of it and left it with my husband. So, I had a little lightweight sleeping bag with me that I ended up not using really because I didn't end up staying in the albergues. I could have almost got away with like a pretty small backpack. I had to wash my clothes every day in the sink, but I had a couple layers and a couple sets of clothes. I had a warm coat and because it was in the fall, and I had a raincoat with me, which I didn't use. Just things like that. I always hike with snacks because I don't function if I'm hungry. So I always have a little bag of snacks with me, and I always had 1 water bottle. So there's various apps you can download, which I recommend you do some research if you're going to do it, and download a few apps that show you the distance of how far you're going to go every day. And you can see where you are on your GPS. And they usually have recommendations on places to stay. There's a number of them. And I could see that we were going to go up a little mountain. It was the one tiny little mountain on the Camino for the Portuguese way. So that day I bought like 2 bottles of water, and I was glad that I did. One thing I had a hard time with was going to the bathroom. Like, I'm used to wilderness hiking where there's no one around, and if you want to go, you just go. It's not a big deal. But like, if you're mostly hiking or walking through these like beautiful idyllic vineyards in the countryside, which are gorgeous, but there's like always someone in the distance somewhere, but there's no bathrooms. So like, you'd have to wait till you got into town and then find a cafe to go. Or I did sometimes find a vineyard. But that was always like, that was
part of the
for me.
Yeah, I think walking the Camino, it's a definite advantage to be a man, because
Sure.
you just turn sideways and be off the side of the path. But
Yeah.
to answer
They
your
do
question
have
about,
funnels for women now, Tom. So maybe
They
that's
do.
what people.
well, you know what? Chris tried one of those and she really hated it.
I can't imagine it's real fun.
In
but,
fact, she tried it like the second day of the Camino and ended up throwing it away immediately.
Okay.
But
Some women swear by them.
yeah, well, she may have been, probably should have read the instructions. Who knows?
She was swearing at it.
Yes. But I mean, what you carry, we actually did several posts on our blog about how to do the Camino, from everything from shoes to walking sticks to socks to blister kits, and there's a packing list there.
Sure.
But the short answer is, if you've got 2 of everything, that's plenty. You're wearing one and washing one, and layers, as Katie said. I had, a technical T-shirt, so to speak, and then over that I had a long sleeve, lightweight shirt, which I would usually wear in the morning when we were starting out, and then I would usually take it off. And I had a lightweight sweater and a rain jacket. And I think we got rained on 2 days only. All of that fits in probably a 35-liter pack pretty well. And no, you don't need a sleeping bag. We had those silk sleeping bag liners that we used, which is a good anti-bed bug device, by the way. But it crushes down into something this big, and weighs a couple ounces. So it's really a nice thing to carry.
Yeah, whether or not to bring a sleeping bag is always a hot topic. It depends on what time of year you're going. Since I went in like October, I'd read that the Albergs could get a little cold. So I bought a very lightweight, thin sleeping bag at a local European like outdoor store. And then I used it maybe once because I just decided not to stay in Albergs. But people who did, I think, appreciated having them. And then you could also bring if you're going to stay in Albergs, you also probably want to bring one of those super lightweight, fast drying towels because you're going to take a shower there.
Definitely.
And I didn't bring a towel. When I did take a shower at the Alberg, I just dried off with my shirt, called it good. So
yeah,
kept my pack weight down.
Yeah. The other thing, that people talk about a lot is the soap. And if you can find 1 bar of soap, which you can in Spain, that you can use for your body and your laundry, that's very convenient. But the great thing about the Camino is you're passing through civilized areas all the time.
Sure.
You're not in the wilderness like doing the Pacific Trail, or I've done the Superior Trail in Minnesota, where you're out in the middle of nowhere. In Spain, you can count on it, every 5 or 6 kilometers, there's a town.
Yeah.
The town has stores. And you can pretty much buy anything you need.
Sure.
And there are outfitter stores in the towns that are a little bit bigger too. I mean, I ended up, I started off with socks that I thought were the right socks, and I ended up hating them. And I threw those away and bought new socks and, things like that. I mean, the Camino will provide. And Spain is very, they've got everything.
Yep. I also wanted to mention that as far as the backpack goes, if you're a person that is interested in the Camino and is unsure about carrying a backpack, there's so many services that you can sign up for that will take your bag from your place you stayed the night before and take it to the next place. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty common service that a lot of people use.
How much does that cost? Do you know?
So as you walk the Camino, you'll see signs like for services for pilgrims all the time, and people advertising their services. Especially for me, the closer I got to Santiago de Compostela and across into Spain. And so one guy that I knew on the Camino chose to do it just one day. There was one day he decided to do like a 30, 35 or 40 kilometer day. He decided to go for it, and he decided to have his bag carried that day. And I think he paid like €5 or €10. It wasn't that much. But another thing a lot of people do is you can sign up to do the Camino as a group. So there's lots of like tours that you can sign up for. I saw so many like women who were, in their 50s, and they're all wearing pink t-shirts, and they're all as a group. And I saw so many of them like that. And
those are my friends.
Yeah, exactly. And that's such a great way to do it if you don't want to plan it yourself, or you're maybe a little unsure about planning something in another country and you want to just pay someone to organize everything for you, and you just go along. That's a great way to do it if it's your first time doing something like this. So, yeah.
But you can really figure it out too. I mean, Katie mentioned the apps. There are plenty of really good guidebooks too. I mean, the kind of the Bible that's been used for decades is the books by Brierley. And he, it's kind of funny. I mean, that's the book we carried. And about half of the book is him waxing very Catholic and spiritual about the Camino and God and blah, blah, blah. And so, what I did was I read that very quickly, and then I took my knife and I cut it out of the book and threw it away because I didn't want to carry it. And then, there's about a page a day in that book, and it outlines, the entire route. It tells you what the elevation is going to be. It tells you all of the albergues and other places to stay along the way, gives you their phone numbers, their exact location. And so you can use that to get along day by day easily. I had a friend who used that same book, and she went further along than I did, as she cut out the first half of the book and threw it away. And then every day as she would complete one of her early stages, she'd cut that page out and throw it away. So when she got to Santiago, the only pages she had left were like the 4 or 5 pages for those people who go on to Finisterre. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we've pretty much covered it, but in closing, do you have any last thoughts, like one final tip for someone, or I don't know, any last thoughts?
Just do it. It's a riot, and it's a life experience that you can't duplicate and you'll never regret.
Yeah, I pretty much echoing Tom's sentiments, and kind of like I said before, it's really, there's lots of Caminos to choose from, and then there's many ways that you can do it. So you'll find that you keep hearing that most people do it this way, and they hike so many kilometers a day and they do these certain stages. And you don't need to do that. Do whatever you want to do. If you are of a certain, depending on what you want to get out of it and what your physical capabilities are, maybe you want to do 5 to 10 kilometers a day and just take a long time. That's totally okay. You can do that. You can then go that far and then call a taxi, and they'll take you to a lodging and bring you back the next day. There's really many ways that you can go about doing it if it's something that you want to do.
Yeah.
One last question. I've heard that some people, especially people who live in Spain, obviously, do like a day hike, and then they, as you said, then they'll go home and work for the week. Then they'll go back and they'll do the next day. So it'll take them a couple of months. When you sign up for this, do you have to? You have to collect the stamps, but is that all? It doesn't matter how long it takes you to do it.
No, you can do it. You don't have to do it concurrently. I met a woman on the Portuguese Camino who was Portuguese, and she would just go and do a section at a time when she had a day off of work. And pilgrims, you can do it in any order that you want and take as long as you want. And then when you have all the stamps, you just take it to the.
Yeah. We met an Irish woman who would do it for a week a year. And she started in Saint Jean, and she'd walk for 7 days and then take the plane home. And then the next year she came back, started where she'd left off, and it was going to take her 5 years to do the whole thing. But that's fine. The Camino is a completely individual experience. You can do it however you want, and it all counts.
Well, that's great. I want to thank you both for coming on. We've learned a lot more than I even expected. So I really thank you.
All right, great.
My pleasure.
Ollie, I'm sorry that things got a little bit mixed up. This is Corinne. I would love to hear your story and include that in the podcast, of course, because I think after looking at your website, especially, that you've had probably the most experience.
Well, yeah, we've been busy with the Camino for the last 3-4 years. I mean, I don't really count the pandemic years because we couldn't, like last year, we couldn't walk, and then 2020 it was like a complete disaster. So it just sort of, we missed the Camino experience in the last 3 years. But before that, we were really, really keen pilgrims. We walked a lot.
So are you based out of Portugal? Is that correct?
Yes, we moved to Portugal last year.
Oh, okay.
So to be close to the Camino, now we can just walk at any time.
And you can do it in sections or whatever. So
yeah.
Why don't you just give us kind of an overview of what you think about the Camino? We of course have had lots of questions and stuff, but like I said, I do want to include your information. So, and I'm sorry if things got confused.
No, no worries. Well, we walked the first Camino. It was the Portuguese Camino from Lisbon, just out of curiosity, because we used to do a lot of hiking. But I mean, walking the Camino and hiking is really different experience. And we just wanted to try it because we met many people who done the Camino, and then they just told us how amazing it is, and you meet so many people, and we just decided to do it. And well, it was, the first Camino was a bit of a mixed experience because we overestimated our how far and then how fast we can walk. So being used to hiking a lot. But I mean, on the Camino, it's a long distance from Lisbon to Santiago de Compostela. It's like 700 kilometers. And if you start walking long days, like over 30 kilometers from the beginning, you get quite exhausted after 1 week.
Sure.
And yeah, the beginning was quite rough for us. And then we just sort of a little bit chilled and decided to take our time and go a little bit slower. And we started enjoying it more. And we started meeting more people because we were so rushing through and walking like 35, 40 kilometers a day that we didn't have time to communicate with anybody. We arrived to the place, we were so tired, and then we just fell asleep, woke up next day, and then it was like this. And and then after finishing the first Camino, we really liked it. And we decided, we spent a couple of days in Santiago and we walked the Camino Primitivo.
Oh, I heard that's the hardest?
Well, it's short. It takes about maybe 12 days to 10 days, but it's in the mountains, so you go up and down quite a lot every day. For some people find it hard because it's a lot of ascents and descents. But overall, because the distance is shorter, so I would say it's comparable to to longer Camino routes like the Camino Frances, which takes 1 month.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, we started meeting people, and you meet people from all over the world, and everybody comes with a different story to the Camino. Some people come because they grieve because they lost their loved one. Some people, they just somewhere in between, they don't know what to do with their life. Some people, they just enjoy walking, and they like walking, and they do it as a sport. And that's the great thing about the Camino, because there is no standard way of doing it. And there is no right way of doing it. So the great thing is that everyone finds their own Camino, walking the same route. And you get into this, and I don't know, which sort of got into this Camino community, and we started publishing posts and making some YouTube videos, and it became like, I don't know, like our passion and our job at the same time.
Wow, that's really interesting. So what are some tips that you would give people for walking the Camino, or for planning to walk even? Well,
first of all, I think that's there is no right way, as I said. So if somebody wants to walk the entire route, let's say the Camino Frances, it's fine. Some people want to run it. We have friends, they are trail runners. So they just want to run it like as fast as possible, maybe a couple of years, and they walk just bits for a couple of days, for 1 week, and then they go back home, and then the next year they come again. So somebody wants to walk the Camino. There is a person, you should do it your own way, the way it suits you, not chasing anybody else's itinerary, not trying to prove anything. Walk it, you enjoy the walk, you meet people, and there is no pressure.
What about as places to stay? You always stayed in albergues, or?
That's what people usually want to know about, and so because we write about the Camino, we try to provide the information for some useful information for our readers. And we usually stay in public albergues, but if it's if we can't find one that's available for a night or two, we stay in private albergues. But sometimes it's actually really nice to stay just in a private room, just to have a little bit of privacy, and just because it's quite difficult for 1 month to move from place to place and share a dormitory with different people every night.
Sure.
Yeah, but it's all experience. Sometimes you get not really good albergues. Sometimes you might get bed bugs, or somebody next bed person snores really, really loud and you can't sleep. But sometimes it's like a real family. People make dinner all together, and you talk to people and maybe drink some Spanish wine, and it's part of the experience.
I heard you can take bikes or even horses on the trail.
Well, yes, cycling is quite popular, but I don't think we've seen anybody on horse. But I think at all times, like a couple of centuries ago, it was very popular. But nowadays, you still can do it. I mean, it's fine, but I think it's a little bit difficult to find a place to stay where you can leave your horse. But I don't know. We had some people asking about it, but personally, we've never had an experience. I've never seen anybody walking with a horse. We've seen people walking with dogs, but not with riding a horse.
That's a good question. So you can take dogs into the albergues, or no?
You can find private albergues or like guest houses, hotels in rural areas mostly, where you will be allowed with a dog. But it is quite challenging, first of all, to find accommodation with a dog, and transportation to get to the Camino and from the Camino is difficult as well, because in Spain you're not allowed to take a dog on a bus, on a train.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's a question we get a lot now. I don't know, for some reason, so many people want to walk with their dogs, or they don't have anybody to look after their dogs while they're walking the Camino. And they want to bring their dogs, but they have to explain that they will it will be more challenging than walking the Camino without a dog, obviously. And sometimes they might have to sacrifice maybe and take, I don't know, like try to get somewhere without to skip some stages if they can't find accommodation to stay with a dog.
Maybe just tell us one or two of your favorite experiences that you've had on the Camino.
Oh. Well, we walked 7 Camino de Santiago, and the French Camino I walked alone without my husband. And then it's the same. It's a different experience if you walk with a partner and you walk alone. And in a way, it was really nice because I got to meet more people. And after, I think, 2 weeks of walking the Camino, it felt like you arrive in a new town or new city where you don't know anybody. It's the first time you come there. And then you sit at a restaurant, and then you see pilgrims coming from the Camino, and then they know you, and then they just join you for lunch or for dinner. And it feels like you have sort of like a community around you, and the community moves with you along the Camino every day, because most people, they walk the same stages. So you just walk with the same people, you stay in the same places with the same people, and after a couple of weeks, it feels like a real community, like a tight community. Yeah, and I mean, we had really countless experiences, great experiences on the Camino, meeting people that we still keep in touch with. And I think I really enjoy in albergues when you make communal dinner.
Sure.
Because it always brings people together, and then people start talking and sort of opening up. And yeah, you sort of they're strangers, but after one dinner like this, you feel like they're your friends.
I can imagine.
Really cool.
Like I said, we were talking to another hiker for the Dolomites a few weeks ago, and it was the same kind of thing where you go from stage to stage, and I would be the last straggler, and they'd probably always be wondering, is she going to make it? Is she going to make it? I feel I would be that person, but I'm sure there's always that person somewhere. So
yeah. I mean, on the Camino, it's not really. It's not a competition. It doesn't matter who arrives first, who arrives last. So you just want to arrive. You want to make it, and I mean, it doesn't really matter how fast you walk or how slow you walk.
Right.
I can imagine.
If you can, because you've walked it quite a few times now, but try to think about the first time you walked it and the first time you arrived in Santiago de Compostela. What was that experience like?
Well, every time it's amazing. This you would think that after a couple of times it diminishes a little bit, but every time when you walk on a square and you walk past the cathedral and you see many pilgrims, and that just it's such a happy place where people always smiling, some people crying with tears of joy. And just the first time I was really happy that we made it, because as I explained earlier, the Portuguese Camino, when we started from Lisbon, it was very tough for us. It was the first time, our first Camino. But every time it's amazing. It's something different. Sometimes you feel like crying. And when you walk through the square and then you see some people that you met on the Camino that arrived before you or arriving after you, and just people hugging, and it's very, very special. I think even tourists that just walk around the cathedral, when they see pilgrims, even they get excited. And it is really, really special experience, because if you walk for 1 month, it's your aim. You want to get there, and when you finally there, it's a really, really special experience. I think it's something a little bit even addictive, that you want to walk it again and to experience it again.
How interesting. Okay, so you're a mom now, is that correct? I saw you have a little baby. What about taking kids on the Camino? How young do you think you could do it, or how, what do you think about kids?
Yeah, we want to do it in May. We want to walk the Portuguese Camino with our baby. She will be 8 months then. And well, I think if you can manage like a baby a couple of months old walking the Camino, you can do it. I mean, there's just no limits. The only thing that you won't be able to stay in shared accommodation, because babies cry at night, people want to sleep, so you'll have to keep it in mind, and then maybe just book private accommodation that you are more comfortable and you don't disturb other people.
Well, what about kids, though, older than babies? Like, have you seen children on the trails?
Yes, not many, but yes, I think in some Caminos, like the Portuguese Camino, it's a bit easier and shorter from Porto. You see more children and even toddlers. Mm-hmm. But on the Camino Primitivo, we didn't see any children. On the Camino del Norte, I think it's a long and tough route. We didn't see children, so it depends. Some routes they're like child friendly because they're a bit easier and their stages are shorter, so you can walk maybe 15 kilometers a day, not like 25 or 30 kilometers a day. Yeah, but there are people walking with children and with more than one child, like with 2-3 children. Mm-hmm. I think it will be more difficult and will be more expensive because of the accommodation. So the public albergues might be not the best option, unless they're for all the children, maybe from 7 and older, if they can just sleep on a bunk bed. So then it's not a problem.
Oh, I see. So that's something you would have to negotiate with the albergue, if you could have 2 of your kids in a bed or something.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's a good point. Well, Alia, I'm sorry again for letting you in so late into the conversation, but we're happy to have talked to you. I don't think there's much else to say, but if you have any last thoughts, please share them, and then I think we're going to call it a podcast.
Yeah. I just want to say that I hope that this year, people will be able to walk the Camino again, because I know many people, and us including, we've been waiting for it for 2 years, and it's been really long. And so many people had to cancel it again and again, and they're still I'm still hoping to do it this year. So I hope that this year we all will be able to travel again. Maybe not like we used to, but in that will be possible, and people will get back to the Camino.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the girls that was on the podcast, Katie, she just did it. She just did it in September and October. So it's still open, but I think you're right. It's certainly...
It's just difficult for people coming from US, Canada, Australia. Well, they just can't come. So I think Camino without pilgrims, it's really sad. And I hope that this year it will be again a joy, and people will be free to walk and won't be scared to walk and stay and be close to each other.
Me too. I hope so too. Yeah. Maybe we'll come soonish. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much, Alia.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.